So administratively, this is the first formal meeting of the Cable Advisory Committee in a very, very, very long time. Last meeting that I'm aware of that was formally held was back in 2009. So it's been 13 years since Cable Advisory Board had a primary meeting, but that's okay. In the end, it serves a purpose, or several purposes, but primary purpose is to handle negotiations on behalf of the town at the request of town council. But in addition to that, it can also handle other issues as come up, including advocating for residents, which sometimes happens if they need help with the cable television service. That is, I've noticed it has been morphing over the last several years towards the other services that the licensed cable providers provide to the town. And there are obviously, as we know, three providers that have the actual licenses from the town itself. So a little bit on that. And with that, there is, you may have seen the actual formal agenda. We've got a formal agenda is listing of topics is required by the open meeting law. So I went ahead and set that up as part of introductions. So I'm one of the members of the Cable Advisory Board. Brendan, I know you're also a member. And then if each person on here just wants to do a real quick introduction as to where they are, we'll then go on to other pieces as well. Because one of the other items that we have to do real quick, which is item 4, is a formal election of the chair, because that's actually required under our bylaws. Because at the moment, the meeting doesn't have, I'm chairing the meeting and just as a de facto matter, but it's that we'll just need to formalize that a little bit to be consistent. And then the other items that are required is on the agenda itself are items 6 and 7, which is authorization for preparation and submission for the annual report, which is a requirement under the town bylaws, and preparation of minutes, which is actually state law. So those are the administrative items. I figure those will take probably 1 to 2 minutes in total to get through. But first, introductions. I've been on the Cable Advisory Committee formally for about 18 years. I've actually been a part of negotiations with all 3 vendors in the distant past, prior to 2010, when the town council, then the Board of Selectmen, had requested the Cable Advisory Committee to actually do negotiations. And so I've interacted with the various things, and then periodically Steve or Tom before him would reach out if there were individual matters that required someone from the Cable Advisory Board to go ahead and render assistance to a citizen and so forth. So that's a little bit of background. Otherwise, as you may or may not know, I've served in a variety of other roles in the town, including I had a stint on the school committee many years ago, and I'm happy to be retired from that. So, Brendan, if you want to.
Okay, many years ago, I was on the cable commission, probably closer to 20 years ago. And I was on it for a number of years, did negotiations with RCN about their contract. But then my professional life got very complicated, and I had to cut back somewhere. So I dropped out of the cable commission. And I retired. I'm semi-retired. I was a contract manager at an aerospace company, so I'm used to reading a lot of contracts. But I recently retired about 3 years ago, and I'm now running my own business. Just to let you know, I have a long history with cable, dating back to the actual beginnings of public access. My sister worked for the Ultimate Media Center at New York University. And I also was involved in video tech at NYU. And we rented out, not rented out, but we handed out Sony Portapack reel-to-reel videotape recorders to students that wanted to make their own videos. And it was a very exciting time, and I've always been involved with public access and how cable systems work, basically on a sideline. So I do have quite a bit of history on it.
Excellent. Pleasure to have you.
I'll be happy to go next. My name is Ryan Boyd. I am the Executive Director of Wakefield Community Access Television. I started at WCAT back in October of 2013. And in December of 2019, I was hired on as the Executive Director. So it's been a wild couple of years, but you know, it's been very rewarding as well with all the work we've been able to do for the town.
Excellent.
I am Allie Houghton. I am the current president of the WCAT board. I've been a board member. This is my 4th year. And other than WCAT, I'm involved with other numerous boards in the town. I've been involved with the chamber. I was on the last chamber commission as well. Or not chamber, I'm not chamber commission, the charter review.
And I'm Paul Norman. I'm the treasurer of WCAT. I've had that role for, this is beginning my 3rd year. I'm a CPA, and I too have a long history with cable. My first job after becoming a CPA, which was 35 years ago, not to date myself, but it was at Continental Cablevision of Southern Massachusetts. They were awarded the Brockton franchise. I met at the Howard Johnsons, I think, of this write-offs 24, second person hired. Met my general manager for coffee and said, we've got to find a warehouse because the cable reels, the electronics, they're going to be delivered in a month and we have nowhere to put them. So I was there as the second employee in that region. Continental obviously got licenses in the contiguous towns of Easton, Stoughton, Abington, the whole group. And I was hired by the Boston Globe from there because they knew I had extensive experience with cable television, and at the time they were a part owner of some cable television licenses. So that's my professional background and why local access cable television is important to me.
Excellent. Welcome and thank you for joining us during what I know is the kind of the middle of your busy season.
You're welcome.
So in terms of formality, we do have to do an election of chair between Brendan and myself, just because there is a requirement that there be a chair for all committees. Brendan, if you want to be chair, you are welcome.
Actually, I propose you as the chairman.
That's fine. I'll accept the nomination. So all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, done. Okay, so that administrative piece is done. That way we're consistent with the bylaws that require it be done annually, or well, whenever we meet, which once a
That's
decade.
every 8 years.
It's only been 13. Who's counting?
Okay.
It's been a 4 appointment.
A little bit more often, just for giggles, so we know who we are.
Not a bad idea. It's just a matter of having to have a purpose. And personally, I don't mind ever having committee meetings. I just want to make sure there's purpose so that people from the public know why the meeting is happening. So, okay. With that, I know that Ryan and Allie, you had requested the meeting specifically, so turn that piece over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. If you give me a moment, I'm just going to share my screen. Everybody see that PowerPoint there? Great. Let me go ahead over here. Okay. So, hi everybody. Welcome. Just going to give you a brief overview of what we've been up to for the last year and sort of, our financial forecast looks like in the coming years. So to start off with who we are a full-time staff of 5 people. Barbara Worley, our studio administrator, Adam Nessel, producer and editor, myself as executive director, Ian McDermott, our chief engineer, and Amy Couture, our video production specialist. Our board of directors includes Allie Houghton as president, Paul Norman, treasurer, Patty Bianchette as secretary, Brian McCubry, Rob Rania, Bill Carroll, Tom Stapleton, Brian Fox, and Colleen Getty. An outstanding group, if I do say so myself. And this is just for folks who maybe weren't entirely aware of how we are funded. But WCAT is funded. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and almost all of our revenues are funded through cable subscriptions, 92% in fact, with the remaining 8% coming through by fundraising, memberships, and investment income that we have.
Ryan, can I just interject one quick thing there? I just wanted to mention, as a 501c3 organization, we do file the 990 tax returns every year, so our financial data is always visible to the public, and we're audited every year.
Great point. Thank you, Paul. So moving on to some of the productions we had in the last year. We had about a total of 641 productions that WCAT took part in. 215 of those can be broken down by town events, PSAs we created for WCAT members, podcasts, things of that sort. But a lot of basically either WCAT produced or member produced programming. We had 67 sporting events, games that we covered this year, which is more than we've ever done. And that was really at the behest of coaches and community members requesting that, their children's sports be covered. And we agreed to do it because we felt it was the right thing to do, and we wanted to try to help out as much as we could. And then we also, we touched upon 359 government meetings. Now, as you may be aware, but if not, I'll let you know. We cover school committee and town council historically. Those are the 2 meetings that we do throughout the year. But since the start of the pandemic, we were
contract.
Through the contract or the agreement we have with the town, those are 2 of the 3 things we're obligated to cover. Thank you, Paul. Town council, school committee, and town meeting. Those are the three things that we are responsible for covering here in this town. Now, when the pandemic began, in talks with the town, it was requested that we help out with the other committee meetings that have taken place. So what that means for us is we handle the post-production and broadcasting of those committees. We'll get files from town hall, we'll put some graphics on them, and put them up on YouTube and our video on demand and cablecast systems. So far in 2022, here are just the updated numbers we have from January 1 to today. So 152 total productions, 49 of those being WCAT original or member productions, 23 are high school sports, and 80 constituted by the government meetings that we have covered. So the additional coverage was at the request of the town, and we began assisting with town committee meetings throughout the pandemic, as I've already mentioned. And we estimate that our staff's taken on an additional 654 work hours since March of 2020 with this effort. So it's been a lot of extra work that we put in to try to help out. And we've been happy to do it, certainly, but it has been a lot of work. Just want to give you some notable achievements and milestones that we were able to accomplish this year. Try to minimize this guy for myself a little more. But we helped broadcast all the local municipal meetings. We were one of the recipients for the 2021 Martin Luther King Jr. and Loretta Scott King Service Awards. We designed a successful hybrid meeting studio here at WCAT that allows folks to be here in studio and also on Zoom simultaneously, so that we can still maintain a safe distance or be able to participate in meetings from the comfort of your own home, even if the committees are back in person. And actually, the design we created was so successful that we were reached out to by the MAPC and asked to be a panelist in one of their webinar series to help explain to other municipalities and stations, what they can do to have a similar setup that we do. A few other things, I won't run through all of them, but we started a new podcast studio here. We have become a good partner, I'd say, with some of the stuff we've been covering for the high school with sports and graduation and things of that sort. We helped work on the White Ribbon campaign video with Wave, things of that sort. We implemented hearing technology into town meeting to ensure ADA compliance. So a lot of stuff that we're really proud of that we were able to accomplish this year, and looking forward to continuing on it next year as well. So we do face some challenges ahead. And in part, the reason why we wanted to talk to you folks about this. So things we have coming up that pose an issue for us are our future location, as well as the decreasing cable subscription and franchise revenues that are brought in to the town through cable subscriptions. First, our location. So we all know that there's big talk of the high school being either rebuilt or worked upon and refurbished. We don't quite know yet what's going to happen, whether it's a complete rebuild or not. However, we do know that there's a good chance that we are going to no longer have a home here in this space where we currently are. So one of the things we need to do is, well, first, I guess, figure out what's going to happen with the school, which I know nobody has answers on yet. And we have been assured, at least verbally, that we'll have a location within the new high school. But we want to make sure we see that through and that we can work out the details with whichever committees need to be worked out with, whether that's permanent building or town council or school committee, or most likely all three of them. Again, that's one of the big question marks we have at this point. What's going to happen? Where are we going to be? And to put on top of that, the cost that it's going to take to transfer and build out a new studio space for us, it's very cost prohibitive. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't something of a concern. So, we have some work to do and some conversations to be had. And our hope is that we have a comparable studio set up within the new high school. Next up is the decreasing cable subscriptions and franchise revenue. So the increased cord cutting has led to a pretty steady 5% decline in franchise fee revenues for WCAT, which we've already talked about as our primary source of income here. And our financial forecast, despite the decreases we've had in revenues, CAT has been on a break even for the last 2 years. So we've done a good job managing our budgets. But our 3-year financial forecast shows a continual 5% decline in cable franchise revenue. And with no increase in staff, our operating expenses project to increase at a 3 to 5% rate per year. So it makes our objective of operating at a break even pretty unlikely as we move forward. Now, some of the actions we've been taking and looking at are listed here, but mainly, due to the pandemic, we have been pursuing state and federal funding options, and with things that include FEMA relief. So can we get any relief from FEMA for the work that we put in during the pandemic? We're researching, is there anything ARPA funding? Are there any ARPA funding opportunities that we might be able to get with? We've been we've had fundraising campaigns, and we're researching grant opportunities. And, you know, we are going to need additional revenue, essentially, if we want to continue to provide the quality services that we think that this town deserves and needs. So, you know, we wanted to come and speak with you, and I'll leave this up here for a moment so folks can get my information in case they'd like to reach out for anything. So we wanted to reach out to all of you to have this discussion, to make sure you are aware of, you know, not only what we've been able to do, but sort of what we're looking at moving forward as well. And so we thank you for being here and joining us, letting us join you, I should say. And just wanted to, again, let it be known where we're at and see if you have any thoughts of your own. And Allie, Paul, please, if you have anything to add, please do.
So first, thank you. Great presentation. And I'm confident that this will probably be, have to be done multiple times. So very good practice and well done. So you've got good polish on it and much appreciated. The amount of work that goes into the productions is very evident. So having watched a lot of productions and seen how things are done, you guys do a fantastic job, especially with the resources that you have. So it is appreciated. And what I'm hearing is a couple of things. One being space being a definite issue, you know, two major risks, one being space, especially with something being done with the high school, regardless of what that is. And then the second one being on the financial side. So this particular committee, we can certainly make recommendations to the other town boards. And I think that would be an appropriate role for us to be as advocates from a municipal perspective and internal advocacy, and likely would be consistent with something from WCAT itself as an independent entity. But I have a couple of questions. Brendan, do you have any initial thoughts before I get to my questions?
Oh, did you ask me?
Yep.
Okay. One question, you know, we know that the trend of cutting cable is accelerating, and basically because cable has become so expensive nowadays. Have you thought of opening up negotiations with the cable companies to have your fee extend to the internet side of the cable companies?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So by law, cable companies cannot do that unless federal law changes to allow that to happen. That being said, there is in the State House, there are streaming bills that are being considered, which would essentially do the same thing to internet streaming companies that happen to cable companies right now. But the argument is you're using the rights of way, you know, through the lines and all of those things to access people's homes, and that's, you know, the cable companies have to pay to use the rights of way. And of course, portion of that comes back to fund cable access. Internet companies don't have to do that, you know, by law at this point. And so there is, I don't have it in front of me right now. I apologize. I'll look it up in a minute. But there is a streaming bill that is going through Massachusetts legislature that got tabled for this past year, so we'll try again this year. That would allow the state to charge up to 5% of gross revenues for these streaming companies, and it would be split. I believe it would be split 3 different ways: a portion going to the general fund of the state, a portion going to municipalities, and a portion specifically going to cable access stations within those municipalities. So there'd be a huge, huge benefit for all of us here in Massachusetts. Unfortunately, it just gets caught up in the legislature and kicked down the road a little bit longer. So we're still waiting on that to actually happen. But there is progress being made. There are things happening on the state level that we're hoping in the next year or two, we will see some big movement on that. But at this point, we're sort of stuck, in the legislature, waiting for it to go again and hopefully get more support this time and actually get approval.
My understanding is that there are 25 states that do have legislation in place today. So this is not revolutionary, and I'm surprised that it has not gotten more traction. But our financial forecast, of course, cannot include any revenues from that because the law does not exist.
Mhm.
So it's a valid issue, and cord cutting has been very significant. Over the last couple of years, it's been approximately 40 to 45% losses in number of subscribers, and the rates have correspondingly increased. I personally have seen both sides of that as well in the last 6 months, where the rates increased somewhere in the neighborhood of around 35%. And that was with RCN, the actual profitability that they have is de minimis because of the costs of running cable itself. I don't know the number of active cable television subscribers. Lately, I haven't pulled the last report. The last time I looked, I believe RCN was less than 100 subscribers to cable television in the town, which is really pretty unfortunate. They have quite a few subscribers for internet, and some have phone as well, but the actual number for cable television is just dramatically lower, and it continues to get lower every month for all three providers. I just in the last couple of days, I've talked to actually all three providers for different things because they keep on reaching out, trying to beg me personally to change, and it ends up being rather amusing conversations.
Mhm.
So that's a piece. One of the things that wasn't in your presentation that I was curious about was the PEG capital. So within each of the three licenses, there is a capital budget, although that in the last negotiation with Verizon, that was effectively cut to be minimum. And I believe the current one with the RCN has that also zeroed out in lieu of the internet, providing internet for the municipal part. So what's sometimes referred to as the backhaul network, the loop. So what is the prediction for capital needs, and is there any sort of plan for capital infusions or expectations under the current contracts?
I can answer that if you don't mind, Ryan.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So just like our franchise fees are a contractual obligation annual payment, so is the capital funding. We currently get $17,000 a year approximately from Comcast. As you mentioned, we get zero from RCN. And our recently renegotiated Verizon contract calls for a capital contribution of about $20,000. I can tell you that our capital budget for this past year is $35,000, which coincidentally was the amount of the contractual obligation from Comcast and the negotiated agreed upon Verizon number. But so therefore, those numbers are set until the expiration of the Comcast and the Verizon contracts. So $30,000 is not a lot of capital income, especially when you're looking at a new studio potentially on the horizon. Our current capital fund, unexpended capital dollars are just about $200,000. And our 3-year capital budget forecast does include a replacement of our primary server. It's called a Castus system. Next year, that'll bump our capital budget up to our capital requirements to about $125,000. And then if we look at, reasonable capital spending over the final 2 years of our forecast, which ends in fiscal 23, I believe. Fiscal 24, excuse me. We're anticipating that our capital fund will be depleted from the 200,000 that we have now down to 115,000. And as you noted, I didn't mention anything about a new studio. So our capital funding is limited contractually.
Okay, so definitely huge limitations there,
Correct.
but also important because WCAT has realistically significant capital needs to remain current. Equipment and services is not inexpensive in the multimedia space.
And we have changes in technology, higher bandwidth speeds, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, the equipment has to be upgraded on a regular basis.
And don't get me wrong, we're good at stretching the equipment. We really are. But even the things that, we bought years upon years ago are starting to fade out on us. And, just things, it's tough. It's tough when you need to replace things, but know that, you really can't at this point. So you keep holding on to them.
I can see the reason for a call to action, because as someone who is external to CAT but been involved with it peripherally for 20 some years, I look at this and say, okay, the red lights are flashing, saying, okay, what can be done? So, and Ryan, you and I had a brief conversation after the last town meeting. Some thoughts, and I'm just going to throw them out there that may or may not be viable. Is one is certainly to continue working with the schools. The schools have a necessity, as long as CAT is around, the schools have a necessity for a need to understand equipment, providing services, and there's a similarity. 1/3 of the funding is educational in nature, which obviously includes covering the sports events and things along those lines, but that money runs through the school committee directly. And so having the school portion and having the co-location with the school certainly makes a ton of sense. And that requires very consistent and very loud, consistent reminders to both the administration and the school committee, in my opinion, for them to realize how significant CAT is in needing dedicated space to operate the studio for both the school and other municipal needs. The risk that is there is, and this is a very real risk, is that the SBA, with any funding that the state provides for either a new building or if the SBA is funding renovation, will exclude that portion as not being a part of the portion that is reimbursable. Does not mean that the town cannot build it. We actually have precedent for it with the Galvin. The auditorium was not allowed actually by law. And I was on school committee at the time. We actually made enough of an appeal that the regulations were changed to allow for additional spaces to be built at town expense, and thus the Galvin Auditorium, where we will be conducting our next town meeting, is actually in existence. And so the town can put in that capital, which in my opinion would make a lot of sense as part of building a school. The school is going to cost somewhere north of $150 million. The additional space to build out appropriate space for a studio and help outfit it seems to make sense, especially where that gets rolled into the bonds and the costs for that space and where the town is getting direct benefit. So that's one part. The other part, to potentially address the financial piece, is to consider folding the WCAT operations into a municipal role. And I don't know enough, would need to probably work with Town Council Mullen, that's CIL, CIL Mullen, to figure out what the legal ramifications would need to be, so that the revenues could actually would come from the current sources and could be supplemented through tax levy and other sources that the town does get revenue from. And that would allow for a bit more freedom. It would certainly have changes to the staff. So the 5 of you who work directly for CAT would then become town employees. Whether that's a good thing or not will depend upon your individual situations and whether you like having to deal with town benefits. Not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying that that becomes a change. The other side of it is, it would mean that the capital outlay would probably run through the capital planning committee as well. But that also gives access to significantly more projects and significantly more funding. So where there is funding that's directly tied, the town does have existing ways of handling that, particularly with what are called enterprise funds, which is how the town could provide services, and potentially consider providing competitive services like a town internet service and other things that the town could potentially run if it so chose in the future. So it gives additional outlets for things if WCAT wanted to consider that. From, as a municipal member, I would look at that and say that becomes a win-win, where there would initially not be a direct cost, but there would be benefits, and it would give access to things like, even during transition, it might mean that there's a temporary setup over at the Herd School or other swing space when construction eventually takes place, which may end up becoming a necessity even with the planned construction of the VOC, or potentially even working with the VOC itself to see if space can become available there. That's another option for space. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the feedback and ideas, certainly. One thing that would concern me about CAT being folded into the town, I think, as you put it, I wouldn't want to lose our independence or our we are a nonpartisan nonprofit here that is here for everybody. I would not want to have it be conceived as CAT becoming some sort of state TV or, things that we're doing because, this way, this side said that, that side. Right now we're independent, and I would fear that loss of independence so that we could, I feel like we can best serve the community as a separate entity, as an independent entity that doesn't have to be called into question. And our goal is always to never have to call into question, if we're choosing a side on any issue or any sort of thing, because that's not what we're here for. We're here to, help people share their voice and to get word out about whatever it is they might be. And that's both for, residents and, of course, the town. We work with them closely on many things as well. So my initial reaction would be, I'd be concerned about that at the very least. And Paul, Allie, you might have thoughts as well. But that's the first thought that comes to my mind, at least.
Unfortunately, there have been some municipalities in the greater Boston area who are in fact an arm of the town government, in which access to the studio for production of a show about political candidates that are interested in that are not incumbents, interested in getting the word out, as a public service, that have unfortunately been limited by existing town executives, or elected officials, I should say. Obviously, we have a very great set of town politicians and government officials here, but it is, just supports the comments that Ryan made. It does happen, unfortunately.
Ellie, Brendan,
Just a quick one, about your future location. You've all talked about co-locating with schools, high schools, et cetera, et cetera. Have you ever given any consideration of occupying a empty storefront in the center of town and having much more visibility to the general public rather than just the school personnel? And use that as you could run fundraising drives that would draw in the local people and get them involved, where presently you have to drive out to the high school and you have to know where you're going to reach your studios. It's not
That's
something you see every day.
No, that's a great question. There has been consideration given it in the past, at the very least in the past. There's a couple concerns we have with that. The main one being buying a property or renting a property like that. That's a huge overhead cost that we would have to face. We are fortunate that here in the high school, we don't have to pay a monthly rent. So that is a great benefit of being here. So if we were to go,
and I believe your fundamental utilities are also waived as well.
yes,
And I mention that because electricity is significant, particularly for a studio.
yeah, I mean, it's certainly gotten less due to LED lights and things that have been changed over, but yes, we have there are certain things we don't pay for where we are, is probably the best way of putting it. And if we were to rent a studio space on Main Street, say, or North Ave, one, size wise, it probably would not be large enough for what we would need. We were living in about 4,200 square feet right now, and it's tight for the employees. We have some open spaces, which are nice, but we have employees sharing space right now, and going to somewhere on Main Street, at least given what I've seen on Main Street, nowhere would be large enough for that, I don't think, as well as the rent factor.
Take a look at the Santander, where the Santander Bank used to be, is going to become vacant, and that's a large space.
It is a large space.
My understanding is that there's already something in the works for that right now.
Didn't know that.
And I think the key issue that Ryan hit on is we have zero rent expense, we have zero utility expense, and over the next 3 years, if we're going to maintain break even, we can't have our expenses increasing any more than the 3 to 5%. And in spite of that, we're looking at a $200,000 shortfall. By shortfall, I mean the amount of additional funding we would need to receive to continue to operate for the next 3 years at a break-even status. So, which is our goal. We want to operate within our means. So therefore, I see no alternative to a space in the new high school at this time.
Well, then you're still going to be away from you're going to lack the visibility.
Correct.
You could try running fundraisers online.
Those are good ideas. We are looking at all, as Ryan said in his presentation, we're looking at fundraising ideas. We have an idea to do a holiday photo shoot. We have all sorts of ideas that we're talking about, but with our cable revenue in the magnitude of $400,000 annually, decreasing at a 5% rate with costs increasing, we would need to hire, some type of fundraising specialist. And that may be, something that we've considered and we've talked about, but so we're actively considering all these ideas on how to increase our revenues in light of the projections.
Do you bill back the town for your cost of covering the town meetings?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Well, the town, my understanding, Ryan, is that we're required to cover the town meetings, the town council meetings, and the school committee meetings to start with, right?
We are contractually obligated to cover those three. So those would not be things that we could then go back and charge the town for. Those are within our contract of what we do have to cover.
Well, you could go back and ask the town if they reimburse you for the expenses.
We can always ask. We
But
can
what
always,
they can say is no, and then you're right where you are now.
sure.
But if they say yes and they're willing to contribute, that would be a source of funds.
Well, I think the more you're bringing up a good issue, the more important issue, in my opinion, or equally important, is all the additional meetings that we covered upon a verbal request from the town at the time when the uniform purchasing guidance laws were suspended because of the emergency and they couldn't issue RFPs. They asked us to step in and broadcast all the town board meetings that you have seen. We have not been reimbursed for that. We've paid for that out of our own funds. And that's one of the reasons why, we're in the situation that we are right now. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to look at funding opportunities, which may include ARPA, for reimbursement of that historically and going forward.
ARPA could certainly help with the funding for the last couple of years. The funding going forwards, is going to require to have the town pay for other things. It can certainly be a part of a requested, contractual modification to keep WCAT independent. So, because I do value that independence as you maintained, and from a long-term perspective, there is definitely value in that. Well, I would not be overly concerned about the current town leadership trying to interfere with editorial components.
No, not at all.
That cannot be held true going forward for future people that are unknown. So I do value that independent perspective. Requesting a revision to the contract, I would not be unreasonable and unrealistic. I would suggest that needs to be for a fixed amount annually, so that it could be a part of the general budget that gets presented to the town for town meeting, and would not be a fee for service. If it's done as a fee for service, it becomes much more subjective to the political whims as it may be, as opposed to a more consistent payment with reporting on the back end. So there is somewhat of a quid pro quo for the accountability purposes. And it could be just to throw out a number, I have no idea if it would satisfy the needs, but it could be that the amount starts off at $50,000 a year with an expectation that it go up by 10% a year for the next 5 years, or 15% a year for the next 5 years, to help offset for the loss of revenue and to ensure that there is sufficient capital for the capital components as well. That's where I'm coming up with that number off the top of my head. And in return, there would be the ability to cover meetings upon request and staff availability, which will not be unreasonably withheld. You obviously have a track record to show that. And the other part of that would be the reporting of what is covered, what is not covered, making things accessible, and that increase, which I think is completely consistent with the WCAT mission would also help the justification for including it in a townwide budget as another element, so that when it goes before town meeting, it could be defended very easily of, okay, we've got, these various changes. We've got line items for Veterans Affairs. We've got line items for animal control. We now have line items for broadcast and hybrid components of meetings. And, just to make that effectively sweeter is the ability to open up hybrid meetings for other groups upon other committee meetings upon request. Because as we have seen, including with this meeting, hybrid meetings have a lot of success. And there's a lot of value to hybrid meetings. And I think that if you go before the town council and the finance committee with those requests, especially if in the initial funding can come from ARPA, it then becomes an established component that once granted becomes fairly reasonable. It will be subject to the increases and decreases of town revenues realistically, because as I'm sure you've seen over the years, the town revenues do go up and down from time to time. Expenditures really go down, but the income levels from different things do vary. And keeping the independence in making it so that it's a payment for a specific amount would make it so that you're less likely to be subject to those changes. But I would encourage you to build in both the capital need as well as the operating cost differential. So that way you can still work off of the PEG money as it comes in. And if there are changes that happen either at the state level or federal level, because there are continued possibilities of changes that would have both positive and negative implications on us. So at the federal level, I've heard that regulation, those bills have not completely been sidelined. So it may come up from a budgetary perspective. So that may change. Probably, if it happens, with the numbers I've heard of, is it's roughly 3% of revenue instead of the flexibility of going up to 5%. So if those changes happen, that could also be a positive impact. And if it turns out that there is additional needs as part of the reporting, the town would have the ability to adjust things as needed. But given the appropriate stewardship of funding, I think that to do the reporting, which is consistent with what is already being done on a regular basis anyways, I think you can request that from the town as long as it's deemed a reasonably nominal amount and that there's an additional service being offered. So that way the town is getting something for it. It's getting a guarantee that certain things will be broadcast that are not in the current contract, but there is a proven need for. And it becomes much easier for the town meeting to say, okay, this is what we're getting. We're helping CAT, this is our provider. And by doing that, it also means that it's a municipal component, which makes it much easier to justify in the school going forward as well. It takes those issues because all of a sudden it combines components. So that's my thoughts on it.
It's very insightful. So thank you. I think it's a really interesting idea. And I think that, our board's been a lot of talks with various things. So I think this is something we can, take back with us and really start to discuss as well. I think I appreciate it very much. Very much.
Brendan, other thoughts? You've got a lot of experience.
I'm just thinking that probably Tom Mayo would probably be very receptive to taking a look at this. And, right now they're sort of flush with cash.
Mm-hmm.
So might be a good time to strike. But yeah, it's because right now you're basically giving free services when actually you should be charging for your services.
Thank you.
So,
Agreed. You know, it would be
And-
ideal. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Lieberman.
I was just gonna say, I think that one of the keys here, and Paul, I apologize if this raises the bristles of the accountant side of you, is to avoid fee for service. Because while I think that there is a huge value in recording what the costs are with it, and that would include the, some way of doing apportionment realistically of other costs. If it gets viewed as fee for service or can be broken back easily into fee for service, that, oh, this meeting cost us $225, it becomes very much a value perspective that people say, well, it doesn't have enough value because they look at it as a consumer. These are not consumer services. These are not consumer approaches. And commercial productions are not inexpensive if you want them done at high quality. And WCAT does a high quality. So that's why I'm looking at this saying, avoid anything that makes it look or feel like there's a limit or other pieces to it. And it makes it much easier to look at until you do the annual reporting of, we did what was the number, 359 government meetings. That becomes really valuable. 359 government meetings, we're asking for $50,000.
Right.
You mean it costs us $125 a meeting? No, that covers the ability for any resident to come and use things which you already provide. But all of a sudden, people, if they do the math, it won't come across as harsh, because next year it might be 400 meetings. The year after that it might be 222. But the amount of funding will get separated from that, except at the actual time that gets reported realistically to the town council. It's just a matter of managing the multiple pieces here, where town council is inherently political, town meeting is inherently financial in nature, but it will be a single line item, most likely from a governmental perspective. And then the finance committee, which will also then have to review it as well. But they'll look at the overall numbers and does it provide value or not. They really have pretty limited components, although they ask fantastic questions. So they'll have insight, but they tend not to micromanage each item as a component. So just throwing that out there, I think that it helps strike a balance between the needs of the board and the needs of the town. That may be a way to kind of thread the needle, so to speak.
I think those are all excellent ideas. I also like the idea of building in the capital needs that we're going to have as we go forward. I will say that this may be unrealistic in terms of striking while the iron is hot, but I will say that it was, I believe 2 years ago, that the town needed to become in compliance with a town governmental mass regulation, and we are in fact an enterprise budget now of the town with all of the money. There's really three line items: money coming in from the cable companies, the money that goes out to the schools, the money goes out to CAT. There's no reason that structure couldn't be modified slightly. That gets presented to town meeting, add in the additional line item perhaps that we're talking about, or perhaps this line item becomes more in the town council budget. But my point is that Kevin Gill and I work closely together on that proposed budget before it's presented to town council for review. And we're in the budget review cycle right now. It would be fantastic if we could get a $50,000 line item in there for this upcoming budget cycle.
So I'm not sure just given that it's March 15th, I'm not sure you could get it into a budget cycle for town approval in May, but you can certainly try.
I think we'll take this back. I think we'll digest
Yeah.
all of this and really just sort of, start figuring out what we think the right next steps are going to be. So just can't thank you enough. I mean, for all of it, really.
So among the other questions that I'm confident will come up when these discussions go on a wider scale, other things, is possibility of consolidation, regional types of consolidation. WCAT is definitely the leader in the area. Would it help? What would that mean for requirements? Is there enough revenue from any other local station that would make sense to combine with Melrose or Linfield, just as others that there are regionalization agreements? I'm not suggesting that that's a good idea at all or not. That's something that I know is likely to be asked.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, if one of the surrounding towns, one of the neighboring towns, was floundering their station and they needed help, we could figure out a way to make something happen, I'm sure. But I think just like every other station that's out there, we all want to just keep existing. We want to continue to serve our communities. I've been saying to the board that, with all you folks, I mean, you're in volunteer positions. My board is volunteer position. People are serving this community the best way that they know how. And, here at CAT, this is the best way we know how to do it, by being there, by filming these things, by distributing them, making the government a little bit more transparent so that folks can stay more informed about what's happening. That's the best way we know how to serve this community. Us, along with every other station out there, we just want to continue that work. We think it's important. People would have moved on long ago if they thought this work wasn't important to do. But we all do. We all think this is an important thing that we do, that this town deserves and needs. And, we just want to continue to do it. And so that's why we want to have these conversations with you. And as for your question, yeah, I mean, it's a possibility. Nothing's off the table at this point. So, if there were a neighboring community that was struggling and felt, it could be better served by combining, I'm sure we could figure it out. But to my understanding, no one around us wants that to happen. That's sort of the, if all else fails, what do we figure out from here sort of scenario. But I think everyone would love to, much like joining, the town, everyone wants to maintain independence and serve their own communities the best way that they know how.
Seems appropriate. Any other thoughts? There are a couple other administrative items that I know we need to get done here, and this meeting's been going on for an hour.
I think I'm all set.
So,
Thank
Brendan.
you, Stan and Brendan, for your time. Thank you.
Absolutely, and you're welcome to stay on because it should only take about a minute or so. So we are required to do a submission for the annual town report for any meetings and any information that we have. That's actually by bylaw. And so, Brendan, if you want to do that research, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I know where to get the base information. I can report for last year there were no meetings.
Please, I leave it to you.
Okay.
I wouldn't know where to begin.
But I figure if we take a vote that it's authorized, then that way the submission will be there and it'll be effective for realistically 21 and 22. I'll submit something for the 21 annual report. We've already received that request, and then I will prepare this for planned submission for the 2022 report. And combined with any other activity that the committee may or may not have, because we don't know when we will meet next. So does that seem like an appropriate authorization?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's approved. The last one is minutes, which are a state law requirement. My current thinking, I have been taking notes here. I've got my set of notes. I can type those up and prepare those as minutes. If there is anything that needs to be adjusted that's material, if you can let me know, and then we'll call another meeting to have them revised and updated. Otherwise, we will consider them approved as is, if that meets with your approval.
Yes, it does.
Okay. And any other matters not anticipated? I know we do have one more person that had joined. It's just listed as Ref 10. If that person wants to contribute anything, they're welcome to do so. If anyone else has any other matters pending for the committee itself?
Just as Ali said, thank you both so very much for taking the time to listen to us and to offer your thoughts and advice. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And
Very
thank you
helpful.
for reaching out. And seriously, you're welcome to reach out anytime. You have the contact information for Brendan, myself, and anytime the two of us are, right now the committee of two meets together, then we of course have to call a formalized meeting. Not a problem. You know how this process works. So much thanks to Sherry Dalton, who helped set this part up. So with that, take a formal move to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So with that, thank you very much. And again, if you got other thoughts, please feel free, send us information. We can go ahead and process those thoughts appropriately. Thank you much, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.